Greetings everyone, you're watching Adventures with Rowan and welcome back to Fright Night's Theories, where I discuss my thoughts on the backstories and mysteries of Fright Night's attractions past and present. Today we're going to talk about Creek Town, which includes Platform 15, Creek Freak Massacre, Dead Creek Woods, and Creek Freaks Unchained. And also how the festival could potentially tie into that. So the story so far. Platform 15 was the first maze to introduce the idea of Creek Town, with a company called Creek Tours. And this maze came out in 2016, with the story of the infamous Sleeper Express. In 2018, Dead Creek Woods expanded on this mini-universe that we know today by introducing the woods in the surrounding area and the virus that had rampaged through them in recent times. I say recent, we'll expand on that later. And then we got Creek Freak Massacre, which was set in a place called Creekwood Sawmill, and we got a better look at the town as a whole in 2020 through Creek Freaks Unchained. Now, we know that in the main canon of Thorpe Park, these 4 attractions all take place within the same sort of universe. This is a thing that has been established, it has been confirmed by the resort, they all take place in the same universe. So, here's my theory that I'm going to go further in than that and say that they actually all take place in the very same town in Missouri. Yeah, I know, bit weird how a theme park in England would have a series of attractions based in Missouri, but let's give it a go. So Creek Town, we can tell from the general aesthetic, the way that the buckwheats act and all of that, that it's set in the Pacific Midwest, in the USA, obviously. I believe that the town was established by the pioneers in the 19th century, partially because we know from this poster that the Creekwood Sawmill was established by the Buckwheats in 1889. I believe this to be not long after the town itself was established, which I place somewhere between 1850 and 1870. The thing we're going to talk about with Platform 15 in a minute took place in 1855, so that's my sort of very earliest this could have been a thing point. And then, of course, we had the Homestead Act of 1862, which was absolutely imperative to the formation of new settlements in the American West by colonizers from the East. Which is to say the East Coast as well as England and other places in Europe. And of course we also had the completion of the Transcontinental Railway in 1869, which is also important to Platform 15. So it has to have been before 1869, basically. That's what we know. Since the homesteaders would have needed access to lumber in order to build their settlements, it does make sense for the Creekwood Sawmill to have been built around this time. It does fit in with my theory that the people coming over are homesteaders. So, you might look at this theory and go, okay, but you're wrong because Platform 15 takes place in Victorian England. Well, Victorian England was England in the 19th century. It's Victorian because Queen Victoria was reigning at that time. And the 19th century, as we've established, is also the time when homesteaders were coming over from all over Europe and the east coast of America to settle in the West. So, it's plausible that this is actually a ghost story, an urban legend, if you will, that came over with some of the settlers. The story of a derailed train that never made it to its destination. With rail networks being the major form of transport in this period of time, it checks out that the myths and legends of the time would relate to them. But yeah, I hear you, the Sleeper Express is a real train. We've seen it. It's not just an urban legend. And you'd be right in saying that. I'm not denying that a train at some point did derail near to Creektown. That is what happened. And that is where we get the visual for the Sleeper Express. Personally, I think it might have been the locomotive O'Sullivan. It derailed in a Gasconade Bridge train disaster of 1855. And this is how I've placed Creektown in Missouri. Because this took place near St. Louis on the Pacific Railway. A bridge collapsed and it caused a train to derail. For more information on that, there is a link in the description. Go read if you care that much. But the main things that we need to know are that it occurred on the Pacific Railway, the starting point for what would become the Transcontinental Railroad, which we've already discussed, that it happened on the banks of a river, or a creek, if you will, and that 3 of the derailed cars fell over beside the track. Now, in our real-life universe that we know and love, obviously they're no longer there. But in the Creek Town version of this universe, where, ghosts are running rampant and stuff, well, actually, maybe they're not. We'll get onto that in a second. But this is still here, these 3 train carriages. They're just beside the river or beside the tracks, wherever they fell, just existing. So if the train actually came from that crash, where did the ghost come from? Well, this is where it gets a little tricky, but I say there aren't any ghosts. Yeah, I know, we've seen them, there are. But have you ever been on a ghost walk? Like the kind we have at Chatham Dockside, or potentially, I think I've seen them around the area of York. They're quite common. In fact, Thorpe Park did one themselves, the Monk's Walk Ghost Tour in 2005. Did you ever actually see a ghost on those tours? Seems unlikely. I believe that the sleepers that we see, those ghosts, are actors within the canon of the maze, just like they are in real life. Creek Tours is a company from the present day who decided to capitalise on the urban legend that is the Sleeper Express, with actors pretending to be the lost souls of those on board. This explains the sudden drastic change in story that occurred in 2018's variation of the maze. I watched a POV for every year from 2016 until 2020, and they were all the same, pretty much. The train derailed, stoplight failed, conductor ran for help, and all the souls are trapped, including the conductor himself. Try and contact him. But in 2018, for some reason, the story became about a wedding party. The bride and the groom, and the conductor was in love with the bride, and I don't really remember, this was 2.5 years ago. But my point is, the story just drastically changed, and then we never heard from it again. So what I'm saying is, it was a marketing ploy to get more people into the ghost tours. That's all. And it would also explain the rather over-exaggerated accents, because, I'm sorry, the majority of people who visit Thorpe Park are from England, and the majority of us also do not talk like that. And also the costumes, which are, far from historically accurate, shall we say. Which does make sense, because the thing is, Thorpe Park usually pay a lot of attention to making sure that their costumes are accurate for the time period. But in Platform 15, that doesn't quite add up. They're a sort of over-exaggerated, modernised version of what would have been worn at the time. And I think that very much leads into this theory that, that it's just an act. So, we've established the creation of the town, where it's located, and what really happened at Platform 15. So, let's get into the real horror story behind this seemingly innocent little town with its, morally grey ghost walks that may or may not be a scam. So, we begin with Dead Creek Woods and its virus. We don't have an actual date for when this maze was set, but based on the canon dates for Creek Freak, I place it anywhere between 1889 and 1959, but further towards 59. Probably around, I put it 57, 58, like right before that shut down. But why does that matter to Dead Creek? Well, we know from the story of Dead Creek Woods that the virus that was spreading caused its victims to feel uncontrollable rage and also caused them to become violent. Does that sound familiar? That's right. The reason that Creekwood's sawmill went from a perfectly respectable business to the deranged family of chainsaw-wielding lunatics that we see today is that very disease. The buckwheats, in their ever-growing rage at the virus, began to bring people in as new workers for the sawmill. But they also began to kill them off, just simply for the joy of it. Once the authorities found out what was happening, they shut down the sawmill, as we know from the 2019 Fright Nights trailer. However, as we also know from the experiences of both Creek Freak Massacre and Creek Freaks Unchained, the buckwheats still come out every October and wreak havoc upon Creektown. So the question is, how? Well, this is where my theory starts to reach a bit. But hear me out. I think that most of the buckwheats, if not all of them, actually died from the virus when it came through. And what we see are their restless souls returning to their old home and continuing their old routine. That's why it still seems to be 1959 when they're out and about, and why they only come in October. Folklore states that in the weeks approaching October 31st, the veil between the world of the dead and that of the living grows thin, hence why the buckwheats are only able to return during this time of the year. Now, I promised I would link the festival to Creektown as well, and I'm nothing if not a person of my word. Again, this is a bit of a reach, but I think it works. So, we know that the festival is inspired by vintage carnivals and early iterations of the travelling sideshow, particularly from the 19th century. There's our first clue. It's all set in the 19th century, and yeah, that's a whole century, so that doesn't really prove anything, but it's a good start. After the success of circuses and similar shows across the US, the first of which took place in 1793, a new and terrifying act came together and toured the country to absolute success. This was, of course, the festival. It's more than possible that they performed for the settlers of Creektown, as I put their time of performance somewhere after 1865, simply because of their general aesthetic. Yeah, like I say, it's really a bit of a reach. I don't have any proof. I just think it would be cool if it was true. We've never seen the Creek Freaks interact with the festival characters, but if we were to see that interaction in the future, maybe we could get some more proof on this theory. So yeah, I just thought that would be cool if it was true, but it probably isn't. So that's the history of Creektown. Tune in next Saturday for What's Up with the Crows on Fright Night's Theories. And be sure to comment down below if you have any theory suggestions for me in the future, because I'm running out. This has been Rowan, signing off.